Hello and welcome back to another episode of WJ Live powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal, and we have more bounce in Arizona than all y'all combined.
More bounce?
I'm just going to give you a minute to think about that. As always, I'm going to... See, Cameron knows. He's smiling. He gets it.
Does this have something to do with basketball?
California.
Oh.
On today's episode of the Western Journal, Cameron Arcand, Western Journal contributor, has some interesting information about a new border solution being enacted by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. I have some questions on just what the heck President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are doing for the U.S. overseas. But before we get to that, two things. One, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/WJLive, and click that bell so you'll never miss an episode of WJ Live, brought to you by the Western Journal, the largest and most influential publisher of Christian and conservative news and commentary in the world. We are number one, and you don't want to miss any of that information. You know YouTube does want you to miss it all. So for now, at least, you can override at least some of their soft censorship by subscribing and clicking that bell. And then also, before we get on to those topics, Deputy Managing Editor Josh Manning is here with me with his hat. That's making a very special... We have a couple of special appearances today. One of them is Josh Manning's hat, which we
very rarely comes out.
Yeah, I believe this is a premiere on WJ Live.
This is a premiere of the H hat. That's true.
Josh and his hat have some thoughts about cancel culture and the left. Josh.
Well, I want to tell you all a story about my Aunt Kathy first. It relates to this cancel culture study.
All right, buckle up, everybody.
Aunt Kathy is a ridiculous liberal who loves to harass me on Facebook. That's all there is to the Aunt Kathy story. But Aunt Kathy will return as we talk about this fascinating new study from AEI. Very interesting, folks. For a long time, we've known that conservatives, though we're accused of being skinflints and cheap, we are actually far more charitably minded than the left tends to be. We are called intolerant and hateful, but if you look at an Antifa rally, you can tell, if you compare that to, say, a Tea Party rally from some years ago, you can tell who's actually hateful and who's actually bigoted. It turns out the same pattern plays out when you look at between leftists and conservatives, who's more likely to cancel a friendship. So AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, did a study on this. If you're interested in this topic, you can find out more about it over at westernjournal.com. We have a story on this. If it is not out yet, it is soon to be out. And in the meantime, you can entertain yourself with all the other great content at westernjournal.com. I'm going to read to you an excerpt. This is from Samuel J. Abrams. He's a professor of politics at Sarah Lawrence College, of all places. And he and AEI ran a very interesting study. They sought answers to who is most likely to end friendships over politics. And in fact, he and his survey team were pleasantly surprised to find that the numbers from the May 2021 American Perspective Survey, they actually weren't that bad. Only 15% of Americans report having left relationships over politics. 84% have not walked away, which I guess means 1% have no idea what's happening with their personal relationship.
They don't have any friends.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Well, I'm in that percentage then. You and I both are. Unlike young Cameron, who has lots of friends.
He has lots of friends who he could choose to walk away from if he chose to do so.
So here's what's fascinating about this. 10% of conservatives say that they have ended a friendship over politics. 10%. 28% of liberals say the same. It gets even more interesting. For extreme conservative identifiers, 22% say they've canceled friendships. So that's interesting. Fewer extreme conservatives have canceled friendships than people who are garden variety liberals. Exactly. Here's where it really hits the fan, though. By contrast, a whopping 45% of extreme liberal identifiers have ended a friendship over politics, twice the figure of their conservative counterparts. Now, the twice the figure part that's a little distressing. But the raw number itself, 45%, I mean, that means half of extreme liberals out there have ended a relationship over politics. Now bring Aunt Kathy back into this, going into...
Oh, good. I've missed her.
And Aunt Kathy, you may be watching. If you're watching, I love you. But I have no idea why you're watching unless it's to hate me.
I have an Aunt Kathy too, except we call her Aunt Kathy
because
there's a U in that
Aunt,
word.
Aunt
that just
Kathy
begs to be
from
pronounced.
Aunt Kathy is from Alabama, or from Alabama originally. So I don't think there'll be any. It could be Auntie, I guess, but there's not a whole lot.
Or
of
Auntie
that.
even.
Auntie, yeah, it could be that too. But anyway.
This is the kind of hard-hitting commentary we bring to you only on WJ Live.
Going into the election, Aunt Kathy would just increasingly would harass me on social media. I would post something, and I don't. My days of posting super duper inflammatory stuff, those have for the most part gone behind me. But it was unbelievable the way she would respond, and it was like she watched my Facebook feed, waiting to pounce. And it got to the point where I had to message Aunt Kathy and say, Aunt Kathy, I love you. You're wonderful. And if we can get to the point where you don't do this anymore, wonderful. But I'm going to have to mute you. I'm going to have to turn you out because it's just ridiculous. I'm just being harassed and harangued by this person. And so I don't know if that puts me in that 22% or that 10%. I hope it doesn't. But she essentially created a situation where the relationship had to be paused. And so I guess that brings up the question. Maybe I'll ask Cameron this first. Cameron, are you surprised by these numbers? Are you surprised both at the direction that it's more liberals than conservatives who cut off relationships, and are you surprised by the magnitude of the difference?
Oh, I'm not surprised at all. And I'll put this into the box of studies that we probably didn't need a study for because most of us have probably lived it. And I think kind of back when I was like getting started into doing political commentary, like you said, kind of everyone goes through the phase where they're like posting things just to kind of get a reaction out of people. You can kind of, you learn who your friends are when you have that political awakening kind of phase. And I lost a lot of people. There are some people who I went to school with that will literally just like comment stuff now on whatever I post or go behind my back and say certain things. I have an uncle I haven't spoken to since 2007, thinks I'm alt-right.
Maybe he can meet Aunt Kathy.
Yeah, they'd probably get along well.
Maybe that's probably not safe for on air, but I'll tell you about that later. But
I don't know. We can really boost the viewership a little bit here, maybe. I don't know.
No, maybe they shouldn't meet. He's on his third wife right now, but
yeah, okay, maybe they shouldn't meet.
No, I don't know.
But I think there's a whole superiority complex that liberals have, that they think that conservatives are so morally flawed that they think it's acceptable and a good thing for them to walk away from these friendships. And a lot of conservatives, a lot of us don't view liberals as our enemies. We view them as people who their viewpoints are flawed.
Their ideas are wrong.
Their mind, but they are not in themselves, usually speaking, evil people.
Right.
And that's a big difference between liberals and conservatives, just generally speaking. And I think this study is just putting data behind what a lot of us already knew.
So that's a good response. So George, I'm curious from you. It seems to me that a world in which half of the people who have a prevalent worldview are willing to cut off relationships with those who don't share them, it seems to me that that's probably not ultimately good for the political discourse. What does that do down the road? Okay, They cut them off today. So what's the repercussion of that, especially if the phenomenon grows?
So, you were listing at the beginning of this, Josh, the things that liberals accuse conservatives of that they are, in fact, most guilty of, right? Charitable giving, and this kind of
tolerance,
lack of tolerance sort of idea. The one other thing that liberals often accuse conservatives of doing is putting themselves in echo chambers. We only talk to each other about our own ideas. That's exactly what the effect of this is. These are liberals and extreme liberals, in the case of the 45% number, who are just amplifying the echo chamber that they already exist in. You know, people who have different opinions from them, they can't take it. They can't listen to it. And the reason for that is, we're all talking about family members. I may as well do this too. So my sister teaches English at a college in Massachusetts. So you can just read liberal, extra liberal, even more liberal than that from all those qualifiers, right? She's in Massachusetts. She's at a college. She teaches English. There may be somebody on the planet more liberal than she is, but I don't know that I've ever met them. She once told me 7 or 8 years ago, and I love my sister, and we get along just fine because we don't talk about politics. But she once told me that my mom, I think, had asked her, "Hey, have you been reading the stuff that George has been writing?" And my sister said, "No. Basically, I can't take it. I can't do it." Something like that.
Well, in her defense, we have a hard time taking it when you write.
Well, that's true. Most people have trouble reading what I write, especially if it's done in my own handwriting. I can't even read that. And I said to her, I understand that. I said, if all of my opinions were based on emotion instead of fact, I couldn't take any opposing viewpoints either. She really didn't like that response, and now we don't talk about politics. So, but it's true. Liberal. Another truism that I've often quoted from the late great Charles Krauthammer. Conservatives all think liberals are stupid, and liberals all think conservatives are mean. And it's not that liberals are stupid, it's that they choose not to think. It is that they prioritize emotion and feeling over thought and result, right? On the left, the intention of the policy is what the policy is judged on, not the effect. Whereas conservatives judge it based on what actually happens. What do we think will happen? What did happen? That's what matters. And it's not that the results of many policies are not perfect. So conservatives make this choice. So we're going to go with this policy that is less imperfect than this policy over here. Whereas liberals literally invent a policy that in a perfect world might result in a perfect result and decide to implement that as if we lived in a perfect world, which is ludicrous. Yeah. It's just ludicrous, but it feels good. Yeah. It feels good to do it. And that's what you get with this kind of lack of communication. It's just a reinforcement in liberal circles that that's the right way to handle policy. And it is a vicious circle.
It is. It is. And we're going to go over on this, so I'll just wrap this segment up super quickly. I think the thing that may worry me the most about this is that society actually does need a soft feeling, emotional insight into how the populace is doing.
Sure, absolutely.
You can't a world run by economists, God help us. I think it was, what did Reagan who said... It
would certainly be boring.
What Reagan who said, if you were to take all the economists in the world and stack them toward the moon, it would be a good thing. You don't want a world run by that.
I did once read that if you're throwing a faculty party, you want to make sure that you don't invite more than 20% of the guests from the economics department. That's a true. You will not have a successful party if more than 20% of your guests are from economics.
Well, the point
I've been told.
Is there's some stuff that exists not on the left, but on the softer liberal side of things that is actually useful.
Sure.
It's important. It's important that there not be an enormous cleavage between the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor in a society. That's an observation that conservatives they're not that inclined to make. It's an observation that liberals are inclined to make, and it's a good observation.
It is.
So the problem is if each of us has a piece of the puzzle, and one of us just refuses to talk to the other, it's going to be very hard to solve the puzzle.
Right.
Now, I think conservatives have far more pieces to the puzzle and far more important pieces. But the problem is there are some things where conservatives go too far in one direction. And if the left if liberals, refuse to play the game, that is a significant problem for society going forward.
Agreed. I completely agree. And one area in which liberals are refusing to play the game, or maybe even refusing to acknowledge the game exists, is border security. We in the past, how long has Biden been in office now? It's not 150 days yet. I guess we're coming up 120, 125, somewhere in there. And we've seen a complete 180 on border security. It's been a disaster for years and years and years. Donald Trump did not fix it. He mitigated it. It got better for those 4 years under the Trump administration. And Joe Biden, in a mere handful of months, has managed to reverse almost all of that. With no help coming from the federal government, it looks like Texas is getting ready to take matters into their own hands. Cameron.
Yeah, so yesterday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott held the Border Security Summit down in Del Rio, Texas, with other state leaders. Some citizens of the state were there as well. And basically the purpose of this meeting was essentially, okay, the federal government has established that they're going to do absolutely nothing to help us solve this crisis. So we have no other choice but to take matters into our own hands. So I have this tweet here from Greg Abbott. I'm going to read it off right now. Some of his big points, key takeaways from we're going to get to that graph in a second. But first thing was he declared a disaster declaration. Now, normally when migrants cross the border, they will either get their court summons. Some of them might go to a detention center or specific facility, but a lot of them are awaiting papers, might get sent off somewhere else. They typically aren't arrested. What Texas is doing right now is any individual that is entering across the border illegally will be subject to arrest. Another big point is they're creating a task force. It'll be interesting to see what comes from that. But probably the biggest takeaway from all of this is the Biden administration on day one stopped border wall construction completely. Now Texas is saying, hey, we're going to try and build that border wall ourselves. They're investing $1 billion in funding to border security. It's kind of unclear at this time what that money will do, especially because immigration is typically handled at the federal level. Mm-hmm. But we are probably going to see a lot of developments in the coming days and weeks about what this means for the state of Texas and the border communities that are in there. So kind of what I wanted to ask you guys is, do you think we're going to see this sort of shift to states like Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas and California taking these matters into their own hands? Or do you think this is going to be something that's going to create a legal battle between the federal government and Texas first?
Well, go ahead.
So I don't see that happening in California or New Mexico simply because the state governments are, so much bluer than Texas. In Arizona, although the state is fairly purple from a national perspective, state government still remains pretty red. We have a good conservative Republican governor. I don't agree with everything that Governor Ducey does, but generally speaking, he does, I think, a pretty good job. We have Republican-controlled legislature, and so maybe Arizona. I could see possibly Arizona doing that. And in fact, Texas, just my knee-jerk reaction here, Texas may force Arizona's hand, I think. If Texas actually does that, constructs a significant amount of border wall, that is unlikely to stop illegal immigration. It is more likely to shift it from from the Texas border over to the other three states. My guess is those migrants are going to find themselves more welcomed by New Mexico and California and less welcomed in Arizona, but time will tell.
Given California's willingness to thumb its nose at conservatives every chance it gets, I think it's entirely possible California will act based on what Abbott has done, and detonate whatever wall they do have built along the border. It is an interesting thing. I'm kind of trying to place this in my mind in this federalism matrix, because you think, oh, well, okay, Texas wants to handle this a different way than other states. Good for them. Hey, that's a laboratory of democracy working. But at the end of the day, borders are a national concern, not a state level concern. And it is absolutely absurd that one of the states is having to take on a responsibility that belongs to the federal government, especially when those jerks in the federal government continue to take on responsibilities that belong to the states. They won't take on one of the core responsibilities that they should have. It is unbelievable that we have a federal Department of Education and we don't control our own borders. That's just absolutely nuts to me. I do think George is right about it essentially diverting immigrants. I don't know enough about the way the illegal immigration sort of migration patterns work and where the coyotes go and how they respond. But I mean, we were talking about economics earlier. Simple economics says that you essentially you plug up a hole, they're going to move to the next hole, which would be New Mexico. So I don't know what the end result would be. I do think Abbott has done he and DeSantis have done an enormous amount to keep the conservative cause invigorated while we've been out of the White House and out of the Congress. They are both, and DeSantis probably more so than Abbott, because we felt like Abbott flinched a little bit on COVID. But those guys have shown Republicans and conservatives in other parts of the country, hey, there is still hope, and there are still conservative bastions out there, and there are still places that believe in freedom. So that's an encouraging thing. I would certainly like to see Arizona take it up. And we have lots of wall already, and we have lots of we have mountains as well that help block this. But the more we can do, the better off we are. There's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse for the porous nature of the southern border in the United States. And there's no excuse for the Vice President of the United States responding to criticisms of her not visiting the border with the comment, well, I haven't visited Europe either. That honestly, you're our editor-in-chief. The next time you tell me there's something I haven't done, that will be my response. Well, I haven't visited Europe either, George.
See how that works for you.
Exactly. You'd fire me, which is what should happen with her.
I said we had two special guests on the show today, one of them being Josh Manning's hat, the other being Cameron Arcan's whiteboard. We don't want to miss out on that. I know he's done. Look at those graphics.
It's a preview.
Folks. These are, we don't want to miss these. Cameron, tell us what you're showing us there.
Yeah, so I know this looks kind of ridiculous. I look like a discount version of Karl Rove right now, but
I would say an upgrade from Karl Rove, personally. But
upgrade from Karl Rove, discount version of Tim Russert.
So I basically trying to show the border encounters and timeliness of all of this. I think my angle on here is kind of bad, but basically,
go to your right.
In March 2021, we had 172,000 people coming across the border. That was a 72% increase from what we saw in February 2021. And then I also kind of want people to understand that 72% increase continued on, got even higher in April 2021, where we had 78,000 people coming across the border. And then it keeps stagnating. And then we got our May numbers yesterday, and it was 180,000 people coming across the border. So the reason why I bring this whiteboard out, I kind of mentioned the percentages right here of these increases over time, is the fact that this issue, a lot of Democrats are trying to downplay this, say it's seasonal, say it's not a crisis. Well, it's true that this is a seasonal issue.
Sure.
This goes up in the spring. A 72% increase, that is not seasonal. And anyone try and play that off as seasonal is lying to themselves, because you do not see a 72% increase in something that's business as usual.
Well, and just counting those numbers, Cameron, I mean, you're talking about 3 months, and I just did this in my head, but I think I'm right, somewhat over 500,000 people crossing the border in 3 months. 3 months. And yes, there is a seasonality to it. The sprint. Look, we're in Arizona. We know you don't want to be marching through the desert in August. It's going to be 114 degrees out here next week. That's not an exaggeration. It's forecast to be 114 degrees out here. I don't care what you're wearing or how much water you have. You don't want to march through the desert in 114 degree heat. So it makes more sense that you would see more people in March, April, May. That makes total sense. But yeah, 72% is not seasonal. That's
tsunami.
That is a recognition of a different policy in the U.S. than we had under President Donald Trump. And we've heard that. We've heard other world leaders say that that's what's changed in the past 6 months, that people in their countries south of the border are receiving messages from the Biden administration as welcome, as come in. We will welcome you with open arms. Whether that is what the Biden administration has attempted to communicate or not, lately certainly they seem to have tried to get their arms around that and be more intentionally unwelcoming, because they know they have a unwinnable crisis on their hands. But yeah, what organization in the country can process 500,000 people in 3 months? I mean, it's, that's just crazy, and just a symptom.
The post office. Let's put them in charge of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. What a well-oiled machine.
Or Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
I think Planned Parenthood.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's a humanitarian disaster. Can you imagine? They have Planned Parenthood down there just knocking off about 3/4 of the people who come through.
Don't give them any ideas. We know Planned Parenthood targets minority communities already. We don't need to be aiming them at the Hispanics who want to become Americans. So they probably would find that far too enthusiastic a proposal. But listen, talking about Harris and the border and her ineffectiveness there, we've seen this sort of general ineffectiveness regarding foreign policy from the Biden administration overall. And it's really been spotlighted this week by a couple of trips. We saw Harris heading south of the border and talking about it in embarrassing ways. President of Guatemala, basically just before she got there, blamed her and the Biden administration for the surge in illegal immigration. We see Biden now in Europe, and between the two of them, it's been gaffe after gaffe after gaffe. We've come to expect this from Joe Biden, of course. Joe Biden's entire political career is 4.5 decades of gaffe after gaffe after gaffe. So this is nothing new from him. But I was literally making notes for this show. Here's some examples. I got to 4 pages and said, this show's not supposed to run for an hour and a half. So maybe I should try and condense this a little. So let me just give you a couple of quick highlights of sort of things that have been said or done by Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or people on the world stage talking about them. Okay, just a handful here. So a British lawmaker referred to Joe Biden as senile, and he won't remember anything that's happening on this European trip. Kamala Harris did such a poor job south of the border that people in the administration are like, we don't know what she's doing.
We are perplexed.
Yeah, that's exactly.
We are perplexed.
We don't know what's happening. Like, she gets asked, why haven't you been to the border, by Lester Holt, I think.
Yeah, multiple times.
Right. And she says, we've been to the border. And he says, no, you haven't. And she says, as you referred to earlier, yeah, I haven't been to Europe either. You weren't ready for that question, Madam Vice President? How could you not know? Did you have nobody in your inner circle that said, hey, they're going to ask you that question?
That's a good question.
They
don't have an answer. They don't have an answer. And I think there's a reasonable chance that some idiot 35-year-old consultant in there said, oh, just make that point. Well, I hadn't been to Europe either. Yeah. I think there's a chance that was actually orchestrated. It was actually planned.
If that's their plan for damage control, that's what they thought of in advance. That's the best they came up with in advance. Wow.
It has to be. I mean, what else?
So Joe Biden gets to, I believe he's in Cornwall when he said this, and basically looks around and says, "This is beautiful. I don't want to go home." I'm with you, Mr. President. You stay right there. We're probably better off with you in the UK. But what? And look, I get the sentiment, right? You're visiting somewhere. It's like you walk in and say, "Man, you have a beautiful house." Right? That's just nice. But what U.S. president, walks into another country and says, "Wow, it's a lot better here than it is back home." That's just not
You
smart.
got your own family. You go visit some other family and say, "Hey, I think I'd rather hang here, fellas."
I got a sleeping bag in the car.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
While everybody back home is watching you. It's embarrassing.
And then most recently, or the most recent story that I read that we published on the Western Journal was my favorite, probably. Joe Biden just gets entranced by the spectacle of people moving into this area, and he's just watching military formations and whatnot. And Jill Biden is speaking, and basically has to stop and say, "Joe, pay attention," to her speech. Which he then, kind of played off, saluted her. It was kind of cute. But the idea, I mean, it really was like a squirrel moment, right? Like the leader of the free world is distracted by spectacle and can't pay attention to whatever his wife is saying. I mean, and these are the people. I keep coming back to this idea that these are the people who ran on the idea that it's time to get the adults back into the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The Trump administration has just been. Embarrassing on the world stage, and these are the people who have replaced them after running on in part on that platform. So my question to you guys, I'll start with you, Josh, this time. Does the U.S. look better on the world stage now than it did under the Trump administration?
Yes, according to the mainstream media. They were reporting this 2 days ago, I think. There was new data, new survey data that came out. I don't know what they used to proxy how we appear, but oh my gosh, United States approval rating skyrockets internationally under Joe Biden. The problem is that geopolitics is not governed by how much people like you, and the measure of how much they like
how much
you.
The citizens like you.
Well, yeah, and the measure of how much the world likes you, of how much one country likes another, is how much they can push that country around.
Sure,
that's the measure there. So yeah, they may say, "Oh man, we like the United States a heck of a lot better now." Well, yeah, if there's a finite amount of resources and you're struggling for hegemony, I mean, the Chinese, boy, they probably love us like they never have before. Because they're unopposed now. They can have as many Muslim slaves as they want. They can send them to re-education camps. They can
sterilize them.
Hey, I saw a great story earlier today. Yeah, sterilized. I saw a great story earlier today. China controls the rare precious metals mining globally, the market. Yeah. So there's a lithium mine trying to open in Nevada, and it has been stopped, or it's at least been paused by an environmentalist lawsuit.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. Of course, the rest of the world loves this. The rest of the world thinks they're competing with us. It's like, it's like the Usain Bolt getting an unbelievable leg cramp. Of course, if you're running against him, you like that. Yes, I like him so much better with the leg cramp.
Cameron, what do you think? So U.S. Gaining or losing respect over the past 5 months or so?
Well, I'll talk about, because we were just talking about the whole Kamala Harris visiting Central America. And I think I was in San Diego a couple months ago. I think I was geographically closer to visiting a migrant facility than she has been throughout this entire time. And
pithy. Well done, Cameron.
That is concerning. And I think if I made one wrong turn, I probably would have been touring the border. But I think it's one of those things where if you can't have you have all these issues going on in Central America, and she's essentially going there. It felt almost patronizing. It felt that she had to do it. It wasn't something that she had actually wanted to do. She goes, she meets with these people, and there's probably going to be no solutions to come out of that, despite whatever they want to say. And then in terms of the G7 summit, a lot of these leaders are, like you said, they are probably absolutely loving to see Biden with all of this right now, because they did not like Trump because he was someone that was unpredictable, whether that was for better or for worse, but they couldn't walk all over him either. And I think maybe with some of the European countries, they were more clutching their pearls. In that situation, they can probably let their guard down with Biden. But the real big concern with all of this, like you guys said, is with China. And China is really the one to look out for with all of this. And the fact that Biden has been consistently weak on China is going to be a big issue. And similar to how we've had major international security threats in the past, China is that next rising world leader. And Joe Biden has been asleep at the wheel with them, with real no interest to crack down on them, really understand the scope of what's going on. I mean, the U.S. government has said things about what's happening with the Muslims there, the ethnic cleansing that's going on. But I bet if Joe Biden put something out, he'd be very hesitant, or the language would be kind of toned down, because he has to keep China happy in a sense, and he doesn't actually have any interest in fanning the flames in a sense that would actually get things to lower the temperature a bit and make us the most powerful country in the world, as opposed to us competing with China. We shouldn't be competing with China. We shouldn't be. We're the United States. And the fact that we're competing with a country with a communist government is a reflection on poor leadership on his end. And it will only continue to get worse if we get another 4 years of him or another Democrat in office.
He really is an upgraded Karl Rove.
No,
Cameron is. There's just no question.
I think that's true.
We took Karl Rove, sent him back in a time machine, made him just a little bit smarter, and ladies and gentlemen, Cameron Arcand.
But better hair, too.
And better hair. So you guys know
I like whiteboard.
You guys know I like to play a little game called Dumb or Dishonest on WJ Live. The problem with that game here is that I can't think of a reason why the administration would intentionally, dishonestly lie about being this dumb. So I'm left with a better question in this instance, I think, which is dumb or dumber. Do you guys think, who's making us look worse on the world stage, Harris or Biden? Cameron, if you had to vote, which way would you go?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a toughie, I know.
I would say I would just have to go with Biden on this one, for the sake that I think Kamala, we at least have some statements on her, like actually making clear policy point occasionally. Usually they're contradicting themselves, and usually it's ridiculous. But I feel like I feel like I haven't heard anything from Biden on any issue, and I think that that's what has my vote, is I haven't heard him take a strong stance on anything yet.
And you know what? I was Dick Morris, who's a friend of the Western Journal, publishes in the Western Journal op-eds quite honestly. He's been around forever. Great, he knows politics very well. He agrees with you, Cameron, and he would actually argue, I think, that the chance of Joe Biden saying something useful or meaningful in the near future is actually less now. Now that the chance of ending the filibuster is gone. He really has probably little choice but to move more towards the center, and Biden doesn't have anything to say to the center. He's been catering to the left for in order to get elected, and he's kind of run out of those points. But so to you, Josh, who makes us look worse on the world stage? Do you think it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I agree with Cameron. It has to be Biden simply because of the office he occupies. I think Harris is in many ways a disgrace. But the vice president is clearly just a shadow compared to the president of the United States. And I don't think it's that. Biden's gaffes normally are essentially lovable. They're kind of cute. They're kind of charming.
Usually, anyway. Yeah.
Usually, yeah. And I mean, there are
kind of
exceptions
crazy Uncle Joe
to everything, but. Yeah. But I think the issue is that he clearly is not interested in aggressively asserting and protecting U.S. interests. I absolutely love this story from the Western has it up today. The Biden administration just lifted a number of sanctions on key Iranian personnel. And this is as the Iranians refuse to roll back the nuclear program. And a lot of people think they're about to actually ratchet it up another notch. There's just I have no use for a leader who isn't interested in advancing the interests of those he leads.
Right.
And the deal is the rest of the world doesn't either, and they see him for what he is. I mean, the Chinese are laughing. They are laughing all the way to the bank.
The Russians are too. With that
exactly,
good point, Cameron,
exactly right. And it's a very bizarre situation where you look to the Russians for an example of leadership. Instead, that is a bizarre example.
Yeah.
Who would have ever predicted that Russia would? There are some liberal values that the Russians are protecting more than Europe is.
Yeah.
It's very strange, but they certainly have no respect for a leader who doesn't respect the thing he's leading, and Biden's being pulled around by his nose by the extreme left here.
And how ironic that it's the Russians of all people that the Biden administration would be making happy after all of rhetoric of the prior 4 years of collusion and Donald Trump's supposed to be the one who's Putin's puppet, right? And Joe Biden has done much more to make Vladimir Putin happy than Donald Trump ever did. And with that, folks, we are about out of time on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Thank you to Josh and to Cameron for a great conversation. Before we go, one last point to make, because time is running out on the Western Journal Flag Day sale for our subscription. You can become a member or a supporter of the Western Journal. What we do here is not free. It costs money. We pay reporters. We do thousands of stories every month. That includes thousands of hours of research and fact checking and not only writing, but editing all of that. It's not cheap. Good journalism isn't. Go look at our ethics and editorial standards. They're right there on our website, westernjournal.com, and you will see a robust, long list of the standards to which we hold ourselves, standards about truth and accuracy in reporting. And every standard we put in there costs money. All of those things require us to do more work to make sure we get it right. But truth is vitally important to us, and you can help. We are in a fight right now, and you can help by joining us in that fight by going to westernjournal.com/join. westernjournal.com/join. Right now through Flag Day, which is Monday, Donald Trump's birthday also Sheriff Joe Arpaio's birthday.
I didn't know that.
Friend of the show, friend of the Western Journal, America's Sheriff, Joe Arpaio. June 14th, that's Monday. Through the 14th, you can subscribe to the Western Journal for only $1.26 a week. It's, whatever that is, 18 cents a day, something like that. It's very, very cheap. You can become a member. There are a couple of different levels with different sort of perks there. You can read about that at westernjournal.com/join. I won't bother you with all the details. I do encourage you to go now. You've got a couple of days before that sale goes away. I already talked our marketing department into extending it once. This was the Memorial Day sale. I got them to extend it to a Flag Day sale. I don't know. Maybe I can get a July 4th sale out of them, but that's going to be it. I don't even know if I can do that. We'll see. But please go there. Consider supporting us. We need you in this fight. I know we can win. Truth always wins in the end, but we can't do it without your help. So come join us. And with that, we must say farewell. We'll be here to bring you the truth every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. It's not right. Almost. 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I always get that backwards. I don't know. I have some sort of disability when it comes to time zones. I don't know what that is. So 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here, WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. We'll see you again next time. Take care and stay safe.